Welcome to Life in Red.
I love when past guests connect me with new guests. So I'd like to thank Reagan for hooking us up, and very pleased to welcome Kate. Welcome to Life in Red. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, nice to see you and hear your voice.
You are doing some pretty cool things and very unique things that I haven't had a chance to really talk about or really get into, and I'm excited to. But before we do that, I'd just like to check in. How are you doing? I know we're both in Ontario. It's a very difficult time where we are for sure, and for a lot of people across the country and around the world. But how have things been? How's the pandemic been for you?
You know, it's been okay. I think that I have 3 young kids, and we already homeschool our kids before the pandemic. And we kind of have a very home family lifestyle in the middle of the city. And it suited our vibe already of being quiet and being home. But I will say we don't homeschool and we don't live in isolation from our community, and my kids really miss their friends, and the up and down of what we're allowed to do changing constantly, and them trying to understand what the right thing to do is, and all of that stuff's been heavy. So but I launched my business originally kind of quietly in the first lockdown, and now we're in the third lockdown, and I'll be launching City Love properly, my business properly, out in the world. So it's funny that this whole time it's been under these heavy lockdowns that I've been celebrating this project I've been working on. So it's given my family a lot of hope and a lot of excitement inside and in our gardens and that. So not bad.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And sometimes I know for myself with everything, there's a lot of successes I've been able to celebrate, but at the same time, very mindful of the things that have been going on around me. And it's like, like sometimes it feels weird to celebrate things, but
yeah, I also feel very disconnected from my neighbors. Yeah. And that's my work has always been as a social artist. I've always worked with my community, with my neighbors, and really understood what was going on and listened and talked and created with them. So it feels weird to not know what, especially parents. I don't really connect to what's going on with parents who have kids in school. And that's a bummer to women, to mothers. Yeah, I'm a little isolated from that right now.
Right. Well, let's talk about that work in your business that has been soft launched and then getting ready for a big launch, which is amazing. I've never heard the term social artist before. That's brand new to me. So can you describe that and what you do and what you've just launched?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've been working with people and different mediums of art. A social artist is someone who creates an aesthetic, and this aesthetic in some form is the mission of it is to create change. So if you think of the word responsibility, I always go back to this word. There's kind of a drudgery related to this term responsibility, and how do you go about switching on the light for someone to feel that responsibility without it feeling too preachy or too dogged down. And I use art to kind of hopefully find that switch inside of people to turn on this ability to respond, which is taking responsibility and changing it around into a real progressive, active way of responding to something, to anything. And I've had different community projects, community murals and gardening and working with people in this way. And it's really, it's also turned, a term is called social sculpture. So it's kind of creating something together. And the idea of a social artist actually is that we are all artists. We are all creating these experiences with people together. And I'd been working in this way for a long time. It wasn't really until I started getting really into growing flowers and studying floristry, and going down the path of being a florist, that I realized that my social art and my floristry were really one the same, that I was using this medium that was had the capability of awakening people, bringing joy to people, a tool for improving mental health, all of these things. And that's when I really decided to start a business working with flowers and people and community.
Interesting. There's so many ways we can give back. That I give back by speaking, through the podcast, volunteerism. You can make donations. You can do a whole bunch of things. I'm curious, so using flowers and in this way of giving back, take me through some of the process of how this kind of works, not only in, I guess, the physical sense of planting the flowers and what that does for the community, but what are some of like the psychological, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual connections with doing things like this?
Yeah, well, when you look at the flower, the flower is really the soul of the plant. It's that moment of ephemeral beauty where everything comes together, and then there's the death and there's the whole journey of it. And that moment is something we've all celebrated for so long. And giving flowers to our neighbors, bringing flowers inside on our kitchen table is not. And it is not a new thing. This is what we've been doing in communities. And it's been a bit lost that, we've been doing it for a long time, but this expression has been a bit lost, this simple giving to our neighbors, and to grow things and to share things. And I think that, really I can touch on loneliness, right? Especially during the pandemic. This whole thing started with me bringing flowers randomly to a senior who was shut in last year in May during the first lockdown. And I left a little card, and I left it outside of her door of her high rise. I had found out she was locked in, and I just really wanted to give her something. I didn't know her at all. And it sparked up a conversation. We still talk. Her name's Emmeline. We've been talking for the past year. She has no communication with the outside world. And these flowers were just the start of something. And she's told me how lonely she is. And I think that we can give, we can donate money, we can donate our time. Yes, all these things. For me, my medium is the flowers, because I connect so deeply to the beauty, and how beauty and color and smells and what is the word? Nostalgia. These and right now, especially when we're not able to go back to our my childhood farm back in Nova Scotia. I can't go back there right now. I haven't been able to go, but I can grow the flowers and be taken back there. So yeah,
it's like I've always kind of known it in the back of my mind, especially as I became a mental health advocate and speaking about it and learning more about all the different ways you can support yourself and your well-being. And one of those things that always comes up is nature and getting outside. And there's the sun, there's a bunch of things, but connecting to nature. And I don't know if it's biological, if it's psychological, a bit of both, but the way we connect back to the earth and the things around us, instead of, our more urban lifestyle with cell phones and internet and all those different things, that there just brings that peace of mind and brings something, I think, really deep in us, I guess. Is that why flowers spoke to you so much, that you got into being, a florist and growing your own flowers? Is it something you were like missing with your mental health, or something you were searching for?
Yeah, well, I've been growing. I was a really big organic veg grower for the past, couple decades. And in the middle of that, I had my children. And I had 3 kids in 3 years. And my first pregnancy was twins. And I had a boy and a girl, and a very devastating birth. And my daughter almost didn't make it. She had severe brain trauma. My son and her had to go to separate hospitals. She was whisked away on an ambulance, and I had just had an emergency cesarean, so I couldn't even get up to follow her, 2 hours away to the nearest critical care bed for babies. And it really traumatized me. I had just expected everything was going to go well. And I was mad at everyone for telling me that everything was going to go well. And it was pretty devastating. Interestingly, I called my daughter Flora. And that was something that when my husband and I met, we knew we'd have a daughter named Flora after a family member. And when she got better, and it was a long time before I got better. And part of that process to me was giving everything into art. So I have a background in science and education, and had always, done art on the side, let's say, but hadn't really fully realized the healing powers of being around creative energy and letting my creative energy come out. And slowly but surely, I think working with people, working with the earth, working with artistic mediums brought me out of that trauma. And, it's so interesting. Flora turns 12 in 2 years. So what an interesting, 12 years to say that City Love has come, this gift that I've given to myself and to my family is really a healing story of home and what it feels to be home. Before you become a parent or a mother is all I really understand. And before you become a mother, you think you're going to give birth and there's your home. Like you build your nest and you have your babies, but it's not that straightforward, birth trauma or not. So, there's this quote, and it's a famous quote that says, if you're not connected to, you're made of nature. And if you're not connected to nature, then what you're actually saying is you're not connected to yourself. And I think in the end, that's what the whole process taught me, that I really just needed to connect to myself, and my inner self is this really, inspired artist that has a story to tell. And this is my story.
There's a lot there. And I know myself, I'm not a parent. And I actually had an old high school friend who's now a doula. And we were able to talk a little bit about that, about postpartum, and about that sort of trauma you go through when you expect, like you said, like you expect everything's going well, everything's good, and all of a sudden the birth plan gets kind of thrown out the window, and then you never really hear about like the stuff that comes afterwards, right? Like in the stories, and I'm glad more people like yourself and others who are sharing that story as women, as mothers, about those topics that aren't necessarily spoken about in the larger conversation of things. I do want to talk about healing. Because that's something I've very much become interested in this story of healing over this pandemic myself. At the beginning of the pandemic, I went through my whole routine was gone, and I was built my whole life around my routine, and that threw me through some of the worst times of my life. And then I went through a breakup like a month into it, and that sent me to the bottom of the barrel. And I found doing these things I love, these things that really make me happy, really healed me. And I came out so much stronger on the other side. And you talked about how being connected to the earth and doing these things healed you. Can you go a little bit deeper into that, if you don't mind, and whatever you're comfortable sharing? Like, what was it? What were like the feelings like before and after about this healing process, doing what you were doing and expressing yourself through art like?
I think it was understanding that I had a language that was not used every day, and that it was kind of a secret language. And as soon as I was able to communicate with it, I felt free, but first and mostly I feel vulnerable. And I hadn't realized that I had created a mystique about myself in a way, with these walls around it and a perception. And the language of vulnerability is so open-hearted. You can't, if you're attracting beauty and forgiveness and openness and healing and connection, that's what's going to come into that. A lot of other stuff comes in too, but you're dealing with it without this wall. And I think that for me, being an artist is living in vulnerability. And I started to take chances of putting out things into the world and working with people in new ways that took a lot of heart. And I feel like people together as a community, I realized that I could share my grief with other women, with other mothers, with neighbors, and I could hold theirs as well. And I started to see the world totally different. I started to realize that, oh, okay, everyone else's wall is up too, and we're just, my favorite thing to do when my kids were really little is to do handcrafting and knitting and crocheting with women while the kids played, because that's when the real stuff would come out. It's not at the park with a coffee to strangers. It's this intimacy, creating things with our hands and just with an open heart together. So I think the process for me was is this tension of embracing some fear and knowing that I couldn't heal alone inside myself. I had to let it pour out, and the way it's poured out is manifested into this it is manifested into every design that I create, every flower that I plant in my yard, and connection I make with a neighbor. Every donation I make, it's all in that moment of just like vulnerable me.
That's something that like truly resonates with me. And when I was sharing a little bit what I went through in the pandemic with you, coming out on the other side, being vulnerable, I've always been an open and vulnerable person, but being vulnerable in this particular circumstance for me, like it opened up so much of my eyes, and now all I want to do is share it, particularly with young men.
Right.
When we talk about things like toxic masculinity and the way men are brought up and kind of taught to express themselves, their emotions, their relationships. I always joke that one of the biggest things that helped heal me is musicals. And I can't tell you why. I never listened to them really before. I used to make fun of my brother for listening to them. And then here I am doing full-on dance routines to The Greatest Showman. And it made me so happy, and I loved it. And I would sing every word, and it just made me feel so good that I was just like, however you want to express yourself as a man is masculine in a way. And it's not, it can be feminine in terms of a traditional sense, but really it doesn't make you any less of a man as long as you're doing what makes you happy.
Thank you for saying that. My son, it's one of the reasons homeschooling is a big thing for us, is I don't think culture expresses what you're talking about well. And my husband's had a similar journey with this toxic masculinity. And it's important for our son to not have that, he's absorbed it to some degree. Of course, he's not here sheltered up or anything, but yeah, these are big things for boys right now.
I come from it. I was a small town competitive hockey player, and if you know anything about the sports world and
Oh,
men,
yeah.
and it wasn't a healthy place. And even though I knew it was wrong then, sometimes I participated just to fit in. And I like just knowing what I know now. That's why I want to go back. Getting on the topic of women and motherhood, and what sorts of barriers are put up, and like, I'm not asking to spill any personal stories or secrets or anything like that, but when you're in this group with women, and you're talking and people are starting to open up and vulnerable, what are some of the commonalities of what women are experiencing and maybe too afraid to open up about with their own lives, to their peers, to their families, but are comfortable in this space to really start opening up and being vulnerable?
I think one thing that I share with a lot of women is this kind of devastating loss of yourself, and I think in culture and media, motherhood seems like a blip in a way, and you're still able to told as a woman that you can still be successful, you can still have everything. It's not really a common thing to say you are gonna be maybe not wanting to do things the same anymore, and you're going to be a different person, and you're going to be changed, and it might be really hard, and you're not going to relate to people the same. And I think that what I hear a lot of women say is they're surprised about that, which seems still to be, to this day, 12 years after my first kids, confusing that women are still surprised. So I don't really understand where the conversation is around that. I personally, in my sphere of women, I have a lot of women who want to stay home, but think they can't. And they don't really want to join kind of the hustle movement. They really want to take a slow approach to what they're going to do next, but it's challenging. I mean, if you live in this big city and you've already bought a house, and you're living on 2 incomes, you're kind of forced to stay in that lane. And it's pretty devastating because you just don't know once you have your children how you're going to feel. You just don't. Right. So I know, and also there is a lot of culture right now about women having it all. And I think that's hard. Even for me, starting a business, I've listened to so much stuff about hustle and, the side project that you should be devoting to. And I go through it once if my media filter is in that mode that week, then I am like, I want to give up because I'm never going to be able to make it. Or comparing myself to women without children who are able to do that and just thinking, oh, I'm so behind or something, yeah.
When I pay attention to, especially, just people in my circle, people I follow, especially women, you're right. That and it's not just a women specific problem, but the hustle culture, grind culture, all this, like, make the most out of every opportunity, and like, wake up at 4 a.m. and work out and then start your business. Like, it's a big thing, especially among young women. And, I don't know your thoughts on it, but it would seem in a lot of senses that a lot of the conversation right now is about women focusing on their careers and focusing on, I guess, playing the part that the same sort of conversation that men kind of talk about, especially when we're talking about finances and stocks and, that mentality. But it was interesting for me to hear you say that some women just want to stay home after they become mothers. And my whole thing in my world has just been like, the only thing we really need to normalize is living your life that is authentic to you. That if you want to participate in that grind culture because you're happy to do so, or you want to run 3 businesses and be a serial entrepreneur and make lots of money, that is okay. like absolutely go for it. But if you want to stay home and you want to take your life slow and you just want to take the beauty in around you and raise your kids and do that, like that's okay too. I think what I try to, at
totally.
least what I try to talk about is just like, I mean, it's hard, it's easier said than done, but try not to feel pressured by other people's choices around you, you know, and just do what makes you happy. And I think that should be good enough.
Totally. I think that, you know, motherhood is like a new one group of people to compare yourself to, you know, to other mothers. So, I mean, I'm in awe and have so much respect to women who choose to have a shorter maternity leave because they love their work and they have a caring place to, or a husband to take care of a baby. Like, this is amazing. I mean, we could not have made these choices before. But it's like, you know, it's just that there's a comparison now of that. And in this small women entrepreneurial world, like I'm into that now in the past year, seeing that. And just because I'm a mom, I can't compare myself to that other mother who maybe has more support than I do. Even the support, so different from each family, how much support you have to what you can accomplish. But in terms of hustle, I mean, what I think is I just hustle intention. Like, I feel like as long as and that's me being a slow person. Like, I'm just, if I constantly every day just hustle my intention, I've realized that that's my form of it. And it's a common conversation I can have with women. You know, I'm into it too. I'm doing it too. It just looks different. It's a different speed. But I have goals, I have dreams, and it's more than being a mom. It's part of being a mom, but it's more than that too.
I love that. And I think you saying hustling your intent, like that's exactly what I'm trying to do as well. I relate to that so heavily. And I love the way you put that because, you know, I do a bunch of different things and have my hand in a bunch of different kind of projects. And people are like, oh, you must be so busy. But I'm like, I don't feel busy. I still have downtime. I still am able to binge watch Netflix or hang out with
I
my
feel
family.
the same way. Yes,
But,
I feel the same way.
Like something like this is, sure, we might be chatting for an hour, but like, I don't feel like this is taking up, like, it's just like, I love making the connections and I love helping with mental health and I love doing the things I do, that it never feels like I'm overwhelmed or burdened by work and hustling your intentions. I'm like, yes, like that's it, because all the things that I do contribute to my goals and to overall sense of being that like I want to have my life be. So I just like, I might steal it and quote it from you.
Please. I think sometimes too, from week to week, I don't know what I'm creating in a way. I mean, things are changing so fast and the opportunities are so, there's so many opportunities. So, I mean, I know exactly what I've created in terms of City Love, this social enterprise, but I know that in 6 months, an opportunity could come my way that can shift it and have more impact. And if I'm looking at social impact, which is my, you know, what a social enterprise is, it's, you know, it's for profit, but at the same time, looking at social impact, I don't think you can have something that's static. It has to breathe and it has to move because people move and groups move. And we've learned from the pandemic, the world shifts. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What sort of, I mean, you mentioned social enterprise and we haven't really talked about what services and what sorts of things that your business, City Love Flowers, really does. So, you know, what sort of services do you offer? And like, what are your goals by offering them? And especially when it comes to that giving back part, that social enterprise part.
Yeah. So I'm what they call now a micro grower in terms of, you know, there's this big farmer florist movement where people are, you know, farms are coming up all around our city here in Ottawa. And it's become a movement. This local flower, buy flowers locally, do not get them from overseas, especially when they're in season in your community. And I grow a ton of flowers biointensively in my front and backyards on a pretty big lot in the middle of the city. And I also source from local farmers in our area as a florist. And so people buy bouquets. I do small weddings, arrangements, and other cool initiatives that I'm starting up this summer. And really the heart of it is my flower fund, which is the social enterprise that gives back flowers to rotating charities in our community. So the first, I'm working with a food center, Parkdale Food Center, as my first charity. And we will be, putting bouquets of flowers in the cooler at the safe injection site beside the food on downtown in Ottawa. And it's an expression of hope and giving and beauty and nourishment in another way, and so when you purchase from me, there's a give back into the flower fund. And this comes from a project I started last year where people were just donating money to me to donate flowers to isolated seniors. And I had such a big response to this kind of video I put out on Instagram saying, hey, I want to donate bouquets to isolated seniors. If you want to send me money, I will buy the flowers and I will do all the work and drop them off at a community center where they will put them in food baskets. And this is kind of how City Love was born. And I'm a florist and I support 100% local flowers. And I'm really inspired by floral design as an artist. But also I picture myself as what I would think a really beautiful community flower shop would be, with open doors that everyone can come in and everyone can appreciate the beauty that's in it, and it's totally accessible. So the social enterprise is the way for me to give back while still being able to have, a business that can grow into some dreams that I have for it in the future.
Right now, is it just flowers in particular, or do you do like other sorts of plants?
I don't know. I don't. Well, I mean, eventually, to be honest, I'm not the best indoor plant person. I just always joke that it's the ephemeral, it's the process. Trying to keep something alive through like thick and thin has not been something I've ever been too interested in. Okay. So I'm really interested in getting these flowers to people with a really exceptional vase life and whatnot. But I think there's a lot of neat kind of plans I have of how this could grow into a bigger thing for the community. Flowers really are the medium for change, as I mentioned before, in a social artist terminology. And it's just a little seed at this point of what we can do. I'm really hoping to attract a wedding of someone this summer. This is one of my kind of smaller goals, that I can give flowers out of the flower fund and do bridal bouquets and arch and all these really beautiful flower designs that a couple might not be able to afford otherwise. These are the types of projects that I want to do for my neighbors.
Right. I was curious because I haven't so much gotten to receiving flowers yet. No one's ever given me flowers, but I have gotten very into plants lately, especially during the pandemic.
Do you keep them alive?
I do. I lost one. There was a bigger one that I had. And it looked like it was kind of like drooping. So I was watering it because it looked droopy, and I was watering it. And then one day, I smelled something. I was like, what does that smell? And then I'm going around my apartment. It's is there a dead animal? What is happening? And I kind of look in and I lift it up, and it was full of water. I was like, oh,
right.
No.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, learning lesson for Ryan. But every other plant has been A-okay.
The pandemic and the indoor plants has been and there's been some amazing local businesses like do so well. I'm so happy for them, helping people with keeping their plants alive.
It's smart. It makes great social content because you have people like me who are like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I like the feeling that the plants give me, because it flowers, plants, all these things, and incorporating them into, I have a small apartment, whether it's your house, your garden. I mean, there is, I don't know, like you said your background is in science. Like, is there like an actual real science to having these things? Because the positive mental health boost just from having like a green plant in your room, it's like palpable. Like, you notice right away where you like walk by
I know.
and you're like, oh my goodness.
I am sure. I don't know anything about that, the brain chemistry of what gets released when we see something alive and we're sad inside. But I mean, it's a cultural expression that we all share. I know that, and it's the feeling of nostalgia. We all have a memory sense of these things. And I mean, food science is my background, and sensory, like food sensory science is really interesting to me, because we can have a food panel and we can tell, we can kind of statistically quantify how someone tastes something. But the one thing we can't access is the cultural sense, right? So that's kind of, for me, the world I left behind was the science, and the world I opened up after becoming a mom was really that, what is that mystical unknown that you can't measure. To me, that's the interesting thing, because I think we all want to know, we all want to feel it, we all want to understand it, and the only way we can do that is through art, I think.
You're right, because we're especially now, such a technological society. We're data driven. Like, we want to see the numbers. We don't like, there's not I'm not like a religious person at all, but there is something I love about spirituality and like exploring those deeper connections, like we're talking about with plants, or talking about things like yoga or meditation, that deeper self that can't really be explained, but like, you feel it. Like,
totally. Yeah.
Breathing exercises. I've become super interested in that because, sure, there's not necessarily the data in science. I mean, there is in some senses, but exploring those deeper connections of self and how much of a benefit, I mean, you've talked about it with your story, like the benefit of exploring that deeper part of yourself that can only be really explored through art and expression and being vulnerable. And, it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, there is a reason why we give each other flowers, right? It's not, there's something behind all that is not, in my heart, is not to do with consumption. And I think, for me, becoming a florist, it really opened up when I realized that there was a whole new way of floristry and the sustainable floristry, where we, this big movement to get rid of floral foam, to get rid of all these plastics, to really just honor the nature, honor the thing that you're trying to give. Over years, we've become so industrialized, and we haven't even realized that, you're giving this bouquet full of formaldehyde, non-biodegradable floral foam that sits there for decades and decades and decades. And really, you're trying to express like this love and to nature in this, you don't realize you're doing that when you're doing it. So when you're giving that, that's really big for me, that there is this new way of being a florist, and it has to do with sustainable design. And it really comes into the heart and the essence of giving and creating in the original sense of what we're trying to do, which is an essence of love. And, city love is kind of my gift of falling in love with all of these things, and falling in love with myself and where I live and where I'm at. I had a hard time when we first moved to Ottawa. I really didn't fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in. I was dealing with this birth trauma, not relating to other women, other mothers, because I wasn't feeling vulnerable, among other reasons. And I just knew I had to fall in love with where I was at if I wanted to be okay, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, it's the biggest, I think, like I said, the biggest thing I've learned, and now just try to share with everybody, that, you know, the path to healing is really like about connecting and finding your deeper self. And I'm just, you know, I'm grateful that you found that. I'm grateful that I found it, but also continuously explore it. I'm definitely not done learning about myself and figuring it out. And every day I kind of learn something new, and especially with this podcast and connecting with people's thoughts and ideas and opinions, I'm like, ooh, like I really like that. Okay, like let's see if we can incorporate that in my life and maybe adapt it to the things that I'm interested in. And
totally.
If there's one thing I want, is I want people to pick that up in their own lives and to then share it with their networks.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And it's not over. My twins are, like I said, they're turning 12 in 2 years. There's so much trauma. Every year is their birthday and it's all about them. And quietly inside myself, they don't remember this, you know, being hooked up to machines and not being able to be held. I mean, I'm convinced that they don't remember this. I won't listen to the science that says that that my daughter is worse off because I couldn't hold her. I know that she was surrounded by love. And I know she has been since, and she's okay. But yeah, it is triggering for me. And then I have to kind of go back there. You know, I have to remind myself sometimes what makes me feel okay, what makes me feel better, what do I need to do, you know? And sometimes I just do one thing, or sometimes I have to start a whole process again. I don't know. In 2 days, I don't know what I'll wake up having to do, but there will be some work to do for sure.
You brought up such an important point. And this was something I refer back to the conversation I had with not only Ainsley, who was the doula, but I don't know if you've ever connected with Jen Ditchfield, who's in Ottawa, but she kind of runs a business around motherhood and, you know, getting women back to work or exploring their career options. But I've had this kind of conversation with both of them. You touched on that pressure women and mothers have, because there is this cultural conversation around what is healthy for the baby and the child. So you mentioned, you know, physically holding them and how they're going to be better off, or whether it's breastfeeding, or, you know, all these sorts of different things that women have pressure on to perform. And when they either can't or unable to, for whether it's a physical reason or something that happened with you, that how much that weighs on women and mothers, and how they can feel defeated, and how they, like, it just has such an impact because you have so much pressure and you just want to be a great mother, but you can't perform the things that society sometimes tells you have to do.
Mm-hmm. I had that so deeply. I mean, let's just say, you know, not having the perfect birth and not having the baby come out in the way that I was told is best for the baby. Forget about this, you know, the rights of womanhood and having vaginal births, like forget about that, because that's a whole thing. But also just the stats and the information about not having a baby go through the birth canal and what it can do to your child. And even, you know, being asked later on when she's had difficulty or something, and reading a questionnaire that says, well, what kind of birth does she have? I'm like, well, what does it matter to you? Like, you might read a certain science, but my science is love, and she is fine. She came out the way she needed to come because she needed to be alive. She wanted to be alive, and that's what happened. And I say that with a lot of conviction now, but it wasn't until maybe 2 years ago that I said it all along, but now I believe it. And with my third baby, all my friends have water births, home births. Like this is my group. These are my women, and I actually chose to have an elective cesarean section for my third baby, which was not a popular decision in my realm of women. And I had to do that because I just knew it was the only way for me to have another baby. And it was the most healing, amazing experience. And it's interesting because usually when women have cesarean sections and then they have a vaginal birth after, that is the story. I have had the vaginal birth after, and it was so redeeming. I finally felt like a woman. I finally got over the birth trauma of not having the right birth. And I find that so interesting, because for me, I had the exact same experience. I had all of those. I had control finally. I had, I had a baby that was well, that was able to breastfeed right away. And I had a cesarean. So it's all, and then not to mention my daughter with the brain injury, she couldn't breastfeed. So I pumped for her for a year, and I felt so guilty. And now when I look back and I see pictures of me hooked up to one baby nursing on the breast and the other one drinking from a bottle that I just pumped from. I did that 24 hours a day for a year, and I still felt guilty. Like, what is that? It's ridiculous. And like the women in my life, like my mothers, my stepmother, my mother, my everyone was so proud of me. Everyone who knew me was proud of me. And I didn't listen to those people. I don't know who I was listening to. I wasn't even on social media then. So I don't even know what I had absorbed, but I had absorbed a feeling of failure. And that's a tragedy, that my moments with these children were filled with feeling like a failure. And it's not uncommon, whatever your story is, too fast birth, too slow birth, too perfect, too much support, too little support. It's all there, So yeah, I've lived it.
How we have these preconceived notions of what is right and what is wrong. And when those expectations aren't quote unquote met, the guilt and sense of dread and the depression and anxiety that we have surrounding all these things, whether it's motherhood or whether it's how we perform at work or our careers or our finance. It is so interesting how that just becomes a part of our mentality. And, you could never even explain how it got there in the first place. And then how hard it is to break that mold and get out of your own head and out of what all those things are meant to be. I'm so deeply grateful and thankful that women like you not only share this story with my audience and other women and put this out publicly, because it has to be difficult and not an easy thing to do, but thankful that I get to share in these conversations as well, because when I started having, I referenced Jan before, it was the first time I really thought of my own mother and my own grandmothers as not just my mother, but as like a woman. It was so eye-opening to me, because it was just that revelation that like my mom is someone who has, thoughts and dreams and maybe had these things too when I was born, or my brothers. And it's something I never even considered, because she's my mom. She's just my mom. And it's given me so much perspective and time to reflect on, the respect and admiration I have for my mom and for my grandmothers and for other women out there who go through things like this. It's just, I just like, thank you for being open to that and sharing.
Oh, this is great. I'm so happy to be vulnerable with you. It's great.
We've talked about a lot of serious things, but I do have a question as a guy who regularly purchases flowers. What are some of the best I can do to impress the girl on the first date, or impress my mom on Mother's Day? What are some of those like really good things? Because you know, like the very typical ones that kind of like are readily available, roses, for example. But like, what are some of like those really good ones that like, you know, for me and anyone listening, that's really going to be like, Ryan did a good job.
I think that what I've noticed is a lot of women have a flower story, whether it's a peony bush that they talked about once, or something that they remember, or something that they love, something that they point out. And no, it's a common, like, what is your favorite flower? You know, it's actually true. Women tend to have some like this wild look, and some, you know, love roses. And what I would say is, you know, if you're connected to a woman who loves roses and it's not rose season, then, and there are seasonal flowers available, choose a farm, choose someone locally and ask them. Say our florist, you know, call me and say, my mom has a love for roses, and I don't know where to get local roses. And I'll say to you, it's actually not, I don't have any, but I have Lysianthus. They're grown half an hour away from here. They look just like roses. And you can tell your mom, you know, that you can tell your mom that these were grown locally, and she'll love them even more. So yeah, and supporting our local farmers and florists. There's so many florists that are choosing locally sourced flowers now. I mean, that alone is just giving flowers that are not grown with chemicals, with pesticides and herbicides, that have not been flown in, that have not been worked with workers' rights that are dismal. Even the intention of purchasing that and giving that to someone, I think you can feel it. You know, I know you can feel it. It's just a different expression. And that's what local flowers are about. It's not just, you know, like, it's not a simple thing. It's actually quite deep. You're supporting a farm, a family. Often women run farmers. You're supporting a local business and a product that's grown in soil that has been loved, you know, the same soil that you live on, you know. So everything's been treated lovely, and I think that shows in the product.
Yeah, no, and we could have a whole conversation on workers' rights and soil production and mass consumption on agriculture.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's all of that, right? It's all that in beauty, which is so special about flowers, because it's showing you the beauty in making that choice. Yeah.
Before I let you go, I did want to ask about the connection between flowers and men. So we talked about toxic masculinity a little bit, and I also kind of like jokingly referenced, no one's ever bought me flowers. Are we maybe seeing a transition? I mean, in your business, from your experience of like men being on like, not the giving end, but like the receiving end, or becoming more interested in this and being more open to it?
There are so many high-end male floral designers right now, and growers. And I mean, I don't know who their audience, I think their audience is actually women as well, mostly, but we need to take it past the boutonniere. Like these, you know, it's just, I mean, there's a renaissance happening right now with boutonnieres, and I love it. But there's gotta be more to just that, right? Because the boutonniere goes on a like suit jacket for one occasion. So yeah, but I don't know in terms of the consumer level of it. But I know in terms of design and in terms of growers, there's some amazing people that I follow. Lewis Miller in particular in New York City does this really cool community art, floral design stuff that's out of this world. I probably know almost equal amount in terms of floral design, men and women. It's not really a female in our area. It is right now, but it's not in the larger, you know, North America. It's not really as female led as it is here. It's really diverse, you know, not just, you know,
got you back. Sort of. I don't know if it's my internet or your internet.
No, I gotcha.
Okay, there we go. Well, yeah, so I hear what you're saying, and that's quite interesting. And maybe that's the start of transforming, you know, how men in particular look at flowers and maybe getting them. I totally forgot about the boutonniere too.
Yeah.
So I know you said you kind of soft launch, but you're really getting into like a bigger launch. So when is like that happening? Where can people follow you and find more information to maybe purchase?
So my website will be live. I've made a whole new website, really based on the community work that I'm doing, as well as, you know, easy to shop if you are looking to just buy local flowers. It's cityloveflowers.ca, and it's coming out on Earth Day, which is April 22nd. I was supposed to have a big backyard launch party with my friends, and now it's locked down. So it'll be a quiet launch here with my family, which really is what it's about. So as long as we have cake, I'll be good. And I have some really cool partnerships with local businesses. I'll be popping up around the city this summer. I do consulting because I am a really experienced gardener, and you know, we didn't really touch on how magnificent it can be to grow a ton of flowers in your front yard, and how that can really change your streetscape and your neighborhood. And so, yeah, you can email me. All my contact information will be there, and you can follow me on Instagram as well.
What's the handle for Instagram?
City Love Flowers.
City Love Flowers. Perfect.
Yeah.
Kate, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your energy to being vulnerable with me. This was amazing, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the chat.